That's just the start of a rolling number of questions about the programme for government. I didn't think it would be appropriate to table 30 or 40 questions in a single sitting. I thought I'd let the ministers off on that one. But basically, the government came back last month with a progress report on the programme for government. Unfortunately, their progress report didn't report on any progress. So most of the ministers that spoke, they didn't all speak, only touched on certain aspects of their work. But really, a progress report needs to be right. These are the actions we've been allocated. Tim Wolf's told us to do these things. Where are you? Are you making any progress? Is it going well? Are you struggling? Do we need help? What's happening? All we've got at the moment is a status report that says, oh, everything's green. It's all green. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. Personally, I find that very hard to believe, that absolutely everything is okay. So I've tabled a series of questions about various actions in the programme for government to try and actually get progress reports that we were promised by government already.
Do you think now that it's 2 years into the programme for government that there have been enough updates along the way?
It's a tricky one, that, because there is an annual update. I'm not sure that the frequency of updates is the problem. It's the quality of the updates that I have an issue with. I think you could be updating us every week, but that's too much. At the end of the day, it's more important that government's going out and delivering on some of these promises rather than talking about them all the time. And I think that's where they fall down quite often, is they love to talk about things rather than actually doing things. And so I'm not for a moment trying to suggest that government needs to be telling us what's going on every 5 minutes, but actually when they do come back and update us, at least make sure it's a meaningful update so the public really have a good understanding of what is going on. There is a lot of good work going on, and government sometimes forgets to tell people.
You mentioned there the public understanding about the programme for government. When the government uses phrases like the action is green, do you think that's accessible to the public?
Personally, I don't think it is. I think it gives a very simplistic overview of things, and people would look at those and say, actually, everything green means everything is okay. Whereas actually, there are some actions that have been prioritised, which may be much further down the road than others. There are some actions which government might think, actually, 2 years ago we thought that was a good idea, but after we've done some work, we're not convinced anymore. Maybe this needs to change. So no, I'm not convinced government is very good at communicating with the wider public.
Just want to pick up on a couple of the individual actions that you have mentioned. One on homelessness, hunger, and the cold. We seem to be hearing more and more about that subject. Do you think it is something that has high enough priority?
I suppose that's one of the reasons for having the programme for government action in the first place, is to make sure that it is considered high priority. I know there is a working group ongoing, and that's, again, something that we need to hear more about, is what is going on in this space. There is a lot of concern, I think, around things like poverty, food poverty, fuel poverty, and really, without knowing what government's trying to achieve in this space, what work is ongoing, it's very difficult to try and understand, actually, are we going to solve some of these problems that we're facing?
And one of the other ones that caught my eye in particular was the review of the electoral system. Why do you think that is necessary before the next election?
Well, it was one of the sets of recommendations. We obviously had some issues in the last election, if you remember, with lost votes or miscountings and other issues. And really, it's fundamental to make sure that the electoral system is robust enough so that when people cast their vote, they know that they're getting what they voted for. And so there's no point going through another electoral cycle with a system that we all know has flaws and has had problems with it. So if there are fixes and changes to be made, we need to make sure they're done well in advance of the next election.
Is it concerning that we're maybe about halfway now between the last election and the next election, that there maybe hasn't been as much progress on that particular issue?
I think that's a fair challenge, and I think I'd say that, yeah, I'm concerned that there hasn't been enough progress on a lot of the actions inside the programme for government. I accept the view that you need to try and aim big. I really do, and I think that's the right approach. But there's no point aiming for things that are unachievable. And equally, I think if you're over-promising, people are going to start wondering, actually, what are you delivering on? What are you doing up there in Tynwald if you're making all these promises but you're not keeping them? And so, yeah, I think there is a case to say there are some things which really we should be making more progress on than we are.